My forthcoming book, uh, it's going to be a novel, and two of its chapters have already been published in a literary journal. It's something so interesting and so exciting that I'm really fascinated by it myself. This is, I just came upon this subject actually, reading Sassanid period of Iranian history, and I came upon the character called Mazdak, who was the first in history. He was the first revolutionary, socialist revolutionary in history. So this book is about his movement and his life. That's what the book is about. And I think, and while researching on Mazdak's life, I also came upon such important informations about the roots of all religions, really, studying Zoroastrianism, because you see, in the Sassanid period, in ancient Iran, or rather it was an empire, right? There were so many other countries which were, today's countries, which were part of it, that it's absolutely fascinating how most religions, even Hinduism and Islam, have the same root. Because for me it was, I always felt that, well, Islam came from a very different place. You know, it's a desert religion, and Hinduism is, of course, it belongs to, you know, a very different fertile lands of the subcontinent. But then you discover that there was a time when that these two religions were really entwined with each other. And that is an extremely fascinating part. Yes, the name of that book is, in Urdu it is called Rila-e-Fromoshi, but in English it would be translated as The Castle of Oblivion. Since this book is all about, Mazdak is a historical character, I could not change anything of his life or the circumstances. Even this, the name Castle of Oblivion, there really was a castle in where today there is Ahvaz, you know, the city of Ahvaz. There was a castle which was known as the Castle of Oblivion, and in that castle the emperors of this Sassanid empire sent those people whose name had to be obliterated from the memory of the people. Their names were never to be mentioned. Even the name of the castle was not to be mentioned. If any one of you goes to Google, simply types the Castle of Oblivion, you would get these details. Why I'm saying, and why I have given this name is, I feel that you don't get enough material about Mazdak, the socialist revolutionary, the first socialist revolutionary of history, because the historians who were writing history for their kings mostly completely tried to obliterate him. They just relegated him to the Castle of Oblivion. 4th century, that is the 4th century, that's when he was there, that is 400 years after Jesus Christ and 200 years before the advent of Islam. So what it proves is to me that the real backdrop of Islam was actually the movement of Mazdak. Not all records could be obliterated, but he's always mentioned negatively, right? And for instance, that in his times, what Mazdak said was that, you know, in the 4th century, before him there was another prophet who was called Mani. And actually I had read a book about Mani. It's written by, I think, some Lebanese writer who writes in French, some Malouf, right? I can't recall the full name, Malouf. So he had written about Mani. After Mani came Mazdak, right? So in most of the books, they have talked against him. They have also talked against Mani also, because Mani, I think, was also killed by the emperors later, and so was Mazdak, right? And so There is material about him here, there, and everywhere. There is material about him in some ancient histories written in Arabic and now translated into Urdu and available. Then there is the Shahnama of Firdausi, which is also known as a book of history. So I got some material from there. And, you know, in different books, you do find references to him, but it's always negative, right? For instance, it's very strange, you know, because when we were young and we heard about, for the communists were very much maligned, right? I mean, not that I'm all for them. Certainly, there's big flaws in the way they implemented their philosophy. But what we heard was that, oh, they would communalize even women. I mean, women will be common property, right? I was fascinated to see this is exactly what they said about Mazdak, right? That he believed in this, that he believed in the communalization of women, that women will become common property. So how strange, how it lasts and lasts. I mean, this kind of allegation and how it is etched on our historical memory. So these are the kind of things which I learned, and well, I'm writing it. No, it is fiction. It's a novel about his life and how he felt and how he thought and how the social change was brought about, because the social change was brought about. But later it was completely, you know, wiped off, of course. But for some years, it was there. Actually, Mazdak was one of the, you know, clergy person. He was a Zoroastrian, right? Because Zoroastrian was the religion of the Sassanid Empire, Sassanid kings. There was a very, and their capital was Ctesiphon, present-day Ctesiphon. There was a very big, you know, akal, famine, when Mazdak decided to declare himself to be a prophet, right? So there was famine, and the ordinary peasantry was dying of hunger, and there was enough, you know, grain inside the capital of the empire to feed them for months. But it was all locked up in the, you know, big godowns of the elite, of the, well, you know, the ministers and the rich people and all those people. So at that time, he declared that he is a prophet, and God, Ahur Mazda, has come to him, and he has asked that everything that grows on this earth and that belongs to this earth should be distributed equally to all the people, right? And you know, these godowns, one should break their locks and begin to distribute it to the hungry peasantry. The king at that time decided to support him. Why? Because it was the clergy and an elite that used to, they were the king makers, right? They were planning to overthrow him, right? So, as against them, he was advised by the chief of his army. The chief of army was loyal to him. So he was advised that if you take the people with you, right, then this elite, the kingmakers, will be, their efforts will be foiled. So you see, so he decided to go with them, and that's how Mazdak began to, the blocks were broken, the grains were distributed, and then they began to take, you know, take over. They entered into the grand palaces, and they just, you know, sort of thought that they were there, you know, that they had a right to live there. And the elite began to flee from there. So what comes out is that every social change is brought about by several factors coming together, right? And it reminded me of how it happened in Russia in 1917. That was the first revolution. It was the army which was also disillusioned. They joined hands with the you know, Communist Party, And when these two together could overthrow a very weak Tsar, right? So, that's the real state of how revolutions are brought about. They're not brought about just by, single parties, but the multiplicity of factors which becomes active to bring about a change. First of all, let us talk about Abrahamic religions. There are three Abrahamic religions. Judaism, and then came Christianity, and then Islam, right? The narration of the narrative of how the world is created and who we are and how we are supposed to conduct our life is very, very similar, although there is a bit of a change with Christianity. Christianity changed lots of things. Islam went back to what earlier Judaism said. The same narrative, it's the same stories. These things were actually are written down in Old Testament, right? Where was Old Testament completed? It was completed in the Sassanid Empire. Why was it completed in the Sassanid Empire? Because there was a Byzantine Empire, the Roman Empire, and it had a border. And on the one side there was this Byzantine Empire, and on the other was the Sassanid Empire. So these two kept fighting with each other. They had driven the Jews away from Jerusalem. The Sassanids gave protection to them. The Jews came to settle in under the protection of the Sassanids, right? And that's where they wrote in the Old Testament, there are many chapters, because that also I read only recently, and out of sheer curiosity, which is a great enlightenment for me. My God, I learned so much about Islam by reading Old Testament. I think every Muslim must read it to understand where all this comes from. They were staying there, sitting there, they were settled there, they were allowed trade and every good facility, right? So they wrote down all the concepts of for instance, angels with wings, right? These are basically Zoroastrian concepts. They entered the Abrahamic, religions because of that, right? And many other things which were, part of Zoroastrianism also entered this Abrahamic religions. And from that they came to Christianity, and from then it came to Islam. That's how. Similarity about Hinduism, or what is generally believed in Hinduism. You see, there is a belief amongst the Zoroastrians that the first human being that was born was Geomers or Keomers, right? Okay. Now, Geomers, we all know that the root of Sanskrit and Persian is the same, which is Avastha. Avastha is the religious book of the Zoroastrians, right? So Geomers, so the language is the same, Sanskrit. Actually, the word was Jeev Martiv, which means Jeev is living person, Martiv is death. So it meant the first mortal man, right? First mortal man was Jeev Martiv or Geomers. He's also called Keomers because of, change of pronunciation from place to place. Because he was the first mortal man. And before that, there were only gods who were immortal, right? Gods or one god. So he wasn't born alone, right? Geomers was born with a bull. He came riding down on a mountain, right? He came riding that bull down that mountain with a bull. That, I feel, could be the beginning of the concept of Shiva, actually. Because Shiva is born, Shiva has a bull, right? So I think so, I could be wrong, but I think that the Geomers transformed into Shiva in India. That's what I think.